I'm gonna send an email it to you. That's what the kid, Marshall.
We lived here for 5.5 years, now, almost 6, so it's really close to 6. Portland area.
Let me try to start saying that and stay around there.
I've lived all over.
Yeah, companion.
Just message and
Okay, so one.
Found it. But I was, we lived there and down the coast, when I was a kid, I didn't be. But the house we found there.
oh, yeah.
Anything north of a certain amount, it's all.
Information that was requested.
You know, we have a, house that's not too far. Been working on it and we've been.
Superintendent, package information that was asked for.
Yeah.
Oh.
Sure, you've been.
Yes.
Her neighbors behind us have been here forever. Mark, we just stayed here, no,
Yes.
behind us.
Yeah, yeah. We go so far.
Okay,
Her,
Yeah, it's just.
period.
yeah,
And so then.
yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
Really was scary a lot.
Yeah.
Making me cry.
Already?
This is so funny.
Yeah, I got emails.
Yeah.
I will understand.
I used to live there.
Did you really?
Oh. Let's see, after I retired, till 12, so I lived there from 09 to 12. I worked at,
Yes.
Remember a Jewish deli?
Thank you.
Well, my husband was retired. Working at the lighthouse. Yeah, I guess we're retired. I'm kind of a.
Fly back with Jack with him.
Artist that doesn't sell things usually. But I
She
do a
asked
lot
Patty
of
what she wants to do.
pencil art.
We're still waiting for one board member and one. You want to wait a little while before we start?
I still sent my message, so I haven't heard back.
I'm thinking they're thinking more like 30 instead of 20.
So, but I can't read their minds, so
They're
better.
If you don't, it's back into the storm at sea pattern, but more and more and more, it's, redwoods and, light storm. It's color. My.
What happened? Sidewalk. No, that's not one.
I know, I had the thing. You can make something like pretty. eggs.
Once you get into the thing, yeah, it's not. But it's, there's a thing called.
My house too.
And drive it 20 minutes.
Yeah, there's techniques there that are useful because they're doing things.
And they work at it.
Well, that worked well, didn't it? The doctor's all happy. 21's down. Yeah, he's all excited.
So, yeah, we all have our sins, right? Yeah. Well, with the color. I go on making something with color pencil, even though it's very detailed or whatever, they're making the book.
Thank you. Yeah.
I probably already know it. Almost done, and a friend of mine went to all these concerts and she has the bandanas from the concerts. And I've turned that into a cloak for her.
Yes.
And put musical material around me, so.
Yep.
But I did it a different way where you quilt as you go, so you do the squares, and quilt them and lost their mouse. Bring them together before you can bring them together after that. Because I did it was on a big quilt, like, you know, those long arms.
Right.
That I couldn't really do what needed to be done on those things, so like, it was an opportunity to use that technique and learn how to do it. The kids, things keep getting in my way to get it finished, you know that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Some directions.
That's
So Patty, you think if you lose, are we gonna wait for the dailies or we're gonna?
Yeah, Patty, I asked Patty and she said that she'd, yeah, she said she'd like to give me a little time to get here. If they don't hear soon, I'll make a motion to take away their birthdays or something. Hmm.
You taking that, baby?
Yes. But I don't get guarantee that I'm getting up to the bus tonight.
Were you optimistic or pessimistic?
I was optimistic.
Good job.
So.
Here they are. I should.
I would like to make a note that we were able to get Staples to give us a full refund for their lackluster job. Printing and
Relate.
sending the budget document.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
That seems pretty.
Horrible. Can we applaud that they made it?
Mr. and Mrs. Daly, we were just about ready to take a vote, to take away your birthdays.
Sorry, thought it was 4:30 for some reason. My fault. I wrote 4:30 on my calendar. Yeah, sorry.
And your wife listened to you for the first time in your,
That's trouble. Yeah.
all right, you're up. Go ahead.
All right, we're going to get started, so if everybody's ready.
I didn't know I had to.
Yeah.
The green light's on, so the microphone must be on.
But because I'm presenting, I guess I need to. Audio on? Sure. Does that work?
You're gonna get
The little light just turned green. It was red.
Thanks, Terrio. Can she still hear after I present? How about now? Can you still hear us?
Oh, are you asking me?
you.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, I can hear you now.
Thank you.
Okay, Patty.
All right, everybody's here, so we're going to get our budget meeting started and wait for you to present.
We have the budget agents.
Oh, there's the.
Oh, did you not get an agenda? All right, here you go.
Okay, so if I go like. Stand.
I pledge
allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, we do not.
And approval of the minutes from our May 8th, 2024 budget commission meeting.
I move to accept the minutes from the last budget meeting on May 8th. Is that right?
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded, in all in favor?
Yes, it needs to be the budget committee and the board.
All right. All right. Unanimous.
At this time, we'll take community comment.
Patty, here's Sandy Donnelly.
I don't have any community comments signed up.
We have one from Sandy Donnelly.
Sorry, I was done with it.
Can
you read it on this page?
Yes, please.
All right, on page 44 of the budget. I am wondering, in the office of superintendent, there is one additional position that is in the proposed budget, classified or confidential, classified and confidential person. And I was wondering what the duties of that person would be. And my concern is, in times of declining enrollment and less money, this was one thing that stood out. That there was another person added to this office of superintendent. So what is that person, what are the duties?
So that has been corrected from a coding error that was made in a position 4 years ago. That is not supposed to be charged to the office of the superintendent. So it was corrected after discussion from the last meeting.
So you're saying there's not an additional person there?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So was the salary also corrected?
Yes. Anything associated with that FTE is corrected. Because for some reason it was charged to the administrative office in the office of the superintendent in error.
And we're going
Where the person should have been coded to.
What was it?
what page would we?
I cannot talk about personnel.
What page would we find that?
It would be in the general fund. I don't know the specific page because I'm not going to refer to specific pages for personnel costs.
So it was just transferred out of one to the other.
Correct.
Thank you. I just wondered, not the person's or duties.
Sure. And there's no duties within the superintendent's office where that was, they weren't supposed to be there.
Okay, no, I get that.
No, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, thank you.
Does anyone else think maybe have comments this time? All right, so we'll move right along to budget committee discussion. And does any of the members have any comments before we?
I have a question.
Okay.
I always have a question. In the classifications under salaries, you have classified confidential. Those two don't really go together, do they? They're going to be separated out in the future so that,
Did you give me 3 slides? I will answer that question for you.
okay. All right, then.
I know that was a big topic of conversation last time, so I went back through after our last meeting and made sure that people were charged to the right account code based on the bargaining group that they were within. So just a reminder of the role of the budget committee, because there were a lot of questions even after the last budget committee meeting about what can and can't be done by the budget committee. So really, the ultimate goal is to make sure that we're following public input and that we have an approved budget to defer to the board for adoption before June 30th. And these are the things the budget committee can't do, does not set salary benefits or contract terms, does not set staffing levels, and does not decide whether or not a service or program should be provided. So this page was provided to the budget committee. These are the changes to the proposed budget. So there were corrections that needed to be made after our discussion on May 8th. So the first one is updating account codes for personnel and specific bargaining groups, which is pages 44 through 47 were the biggest one changes. So what does that mean? That means that licensed salary has an object 111. Classified salaries are in object 112. Administrators are in object 113. And anybody who is in the confidential, non-represented group are in object code 114. So corrections were made for those groups to make sure that they were placed in the appropriate object code throughout the budget, not just in the general fund, but specifically pages 44 and 47 were where we were looking at when we had our discussions. That help answer your question, Monty, or would you like some?
No, that's
Okay.
perfect. Thank you. Yes.
We had some missing pages last time, and then one that had some weird formatting where all of the description was missing. Those are pages 90, 158, and 170, which I provided to you tonight. Fund 315, in our previous discussion, that was for the bond. On pages 229 to 231, there was an interest amount that was overstated. I believe it was the general obligation bond, but I want to make sure that I not. And I did misspeak, it was a pension bond, so the interest was stated at 300,000 and it was corrected to the 60,000 and change that it was supposed to be. And we talked about the balloon payment requirement of that pension bond at our May 8th meeting and why there's so much in reserves, because the payments keep going up every year. We also discussed the seismic grant and how there actually is some work that is remaining to be completed this summer. And there's roughly 500,000 or so in that seismic grant that has been yet to be claimed for that work this summer. And that revenue and the expenditure amounts were not put into 420 in the original proposed budget document, and that has been corrected. Those are pages 247 and 249 to 250. And lastly, the dollar amounts for the contingency and the unappropriated ending fund balance in pages 56 through 58. The budget document shows those two numbers flip-flop from what the presentation and the budget message showed, so the corrected contingency is 350,000 and the unappropriated ending fund balance is 500,000. And that has been corrected, they were swapped last time.
So you've added 500,000 to your budget
No,
because of
it
the,
was 850,000, no, the 500,000 that we added was the seismic grant. Yes, that is correct. Any questions on the corrections?
So that 500,000 for the seismic grant still has to be used for the seismic.
Yes, absolutely.
Correct.
Very specific.
They're
Yes.
scheduled to begin in a couple weeks.
Even if we hired student workers to move things out of the classrooms, we would not be able to charge that against the seismic
Against
grant.
seismic,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. So the updates in the budget, as requested, discussion at the previous budget meeting. We did the work to go back and look at different areas where we could glean money. We looked at our purchase services, determined where it was wise to switch from in-house to purchase services and vice versa. We made some determinations and our estimates that we had going into the building of the Bay budget have now become the actual expenditures. So we were able to update the budget based on the actual expenditures and came in May. So we have an increased revenue of $220,000 in Fund 100 from what we had in our proposed budget meeting on May 8th. So the revenue is on page 15 of the budget. And that $220,000 to the right is attributed to the following areas. The first is an increase in expenditures in the instructional function of 1,000. It's one XXX because it's anything that starts with a 1. And the net of that dollar amount is $178,319. And that can be seen by the positive addition for salaries and payroll costs of $297,248 in the area of instruction, which are in pages 17 through 32. And a decrease of purchase services in the amount of $118,929, which are also in pages 17 through 32. Next, we have a decrease in expenditures in the support services function, which are 2,000 functions. And I say decrease because the net is a decrease of 58,319. But we have a gain in salary and payroll costs of $96,681 and a decrease in purchase services of $145,000. And lastly, we had an added increase in fund modifications, which is function 5,000 of $90,000. And those are transfers to reserve funds are on the next slide. But I will pause for a question before I move to that breakdown.
Well, I have a question regarding the revenue. With the 220,000. So explain to me again, we're 220,000.
So when we are completing our board reports every month, we operate based on estimate for every single month throughout the year. And until we get through that month and we get our revenues, our true revenues that come into the district, can we change that to actuals? So we have a one-time grant that has come in for next year from the ESD, and our trued up actual revenue costs are $220,000 combined. The one-time grant from the ESD for the online learning program is $70,000.
And then, so the funds that we're saving from the overstated interest amount.
That wasn't a savings of an overstated interest amount. It was just that we put the dollar amount in interest and it was moved and corrected into reserves for the balloon payment. And that's in the debt service fund, not the general fund.
Okay, and then on.
Okay, so the transfers, oh, actually, before we do transfers, one more update. Fund 251, this is our SIA grant, our student investment account grant. We did a decrease in purchase services for $145,000 and an increase in salary and payroll costs for the same amount. So for the transfers, Fund 289, which are on pages 195 through 200. We increased the revenue for $25,000 for transfer from the general fund and increased our contingency for the equal amount to balance the budget. And Fund 289 is the technology reserve fund. Fund 291 is an increase of $25,000 in the transfer from the general fund with an equal increase for the expenditures. That's pages 201 to 206. And this is the curriculum replacement fund. And lastly, we have a decrease in the transfer in Fund 292, which was the vehicle replacement fund. We talked at our last meeting of keeping that, holding that back for 1 year. So we moved that $10,000 to the instructional services function in the general fund. So that's 90,000 net in transfers. And then our last change is Fund 410. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that isn't the last one. 410, this is the big one, $50,000 transfer. So 50,000 increase in Fund 410 for transfer, 10,000 decrease in vehicle replacement fund, 25,000 increase in curriculum replacement, and $25,000 increase in technology replacement. That nets our $90,000. So our total resources and requirements created a budget increase of $810,000. And those are on pages 265 and 266. So you're wondering where this math comes in. So 810,000, right off the top, the $500,000 seismic revenue. So that leaves us 310,000. So the 220,000 in additional revenue is part of that 310. And then when you're transferring one from one fund to another, it duplicates that revenue and expenditure. So that's the 90,000 shown twice in the budget, because those transfers all have to be broken down in those individual funds as well. Any questions on what I have presented? They're still frowns. I wish I had a whiteboard, like so teachery right now. I'm ready to show the breakdown.
Yeah, I didn't understand that last statement.
So when you have a transfer out in the general fund and you're transferring that money into another fund, you again show the expenditures. So I have a $50,000 transfer from the general fund that's an expenditure. That $50,000 then becomes a revenue in another fund, which has to have an equal amount of expenditures to balance it. So it's duplicating it. So it shows it $100,000 change to the budget, but it's really a $50,000 pool of money. She was like it.
I was gonna say, it shouldn't be the same, it should still be exactly the same.
Not the way the budget law works. I forget to balance my transfers like every other year when I send the budget and they send it back and they say your upload does not match your paper document.
So there was also corrections made to some overstated, I think it was the workman's comp account.
Those weren't overstated. We talked about that in the meeting and I checked to verify that the formula was accurate and it was correct when we were in the
Not
meeting.
accurate.
And now, is that from a open claims or claim that has been opened? Do you guys share it with others in the other communities?
So our safe rates are determined by state themselves, and it is based on not only claims, but also, or not only our claims, but also the pool as well. And it also is based on what our payroll percentage is. So they set those rates, and as our payroll dollars go up, because we have to report that by July 15th of every year. And then they set our rates based on what our reported payroll is as well. And then they change our rates and we have to estimate that in the budget. And I do know that they're facing the same increases with saved as they are in PACE. You know, last year PACE was 15% increase and this year it's 20 or vice versa. I can't remember which one, but 35% in 2 years in our PACE liability insurance, and safe is not that significant. Right now our claims are lower, so our mod rating is lower than it has been in a few years. So it does help with what our premiums are.
Well, that's what I was wondering, because that's a big jump from.
The previous.
Right,
Yeah.
but we had a lot of staff members that were charged to grants and then had to be moved into the general fund. And so those boxes.
But even from the previous year of 21, 22, it's like. I will give you calculation.
But we checked the formulas and they are accurate, so. Costs that we have included in the budget are what we expected them to be.
So now on the interest, I understand that it is an expenditure account. However, you still would have had to have a balanced budget. So the 240,000, where did that go?
So before we had the interest at 300,000 and the contingency, a lower dollar amount, and then we lowered the interest and increased the contingency in the debt service fund. The overall dollar amount is equal.
By that same amount,
Yes,
that 240,000,
yes,
in addition to what you already had in contingency?
yes. So we can't move that money from a debt service fund to anywhere else. It has to be there. And we can only allocate debt in that fund to the specific purpose of what it's paying.
So it can't go into the general fund.
Correct.
So then can the money that was previously in contingency be moved into the general fund?
No. Anything that is in the debt service fund is in that debt service fund to pay that debt off. And we have a very strict parameter of the percentage that we can be over or under what our debt service is. So we have to build to what we are going to pay off in 2030 something, 33.
So you're saying that the contingency fund has to remain as a debt account?
What I'm saying- The contingency is within that fund. There is no contingency fund itself.
Mhm.
Every fund in our budget has the ability to have contingency in it. So the 315 fund, which is the fund that I'm referring to, the pension fund, there is contingency and an unappropriated ending fund balance in that fund for that purpose. The general fund has a contingency and unappropriated ending fund balance in the general fund. Every single fund has that ability for us to reserve money for the next years for a specific purpose.
All right.
So that money was already in Fund 315. It was just put in the line item for interest in a higher amount than it should have been. So that was corrected so that the reserve for next year and the year after until we get that debt paid off is still there to make those payments.
In the contingency.
Not in the contingency fund. There is no fund. It's contingency within that fund.
Okay. So you're saying that even though you reduced the interest, can't move it to somewhere else?
No, it was already in Fund 315. It wasn't money that was transferred in, so we can't reduce that transfer. It was already money that was in Fund 315 for debt service. It was just that the object code that dollar amount, that expenditure was applied to was not stated correctly. It's overstated the interest, so now it's corrected that overstatement and put that dollar amount in the reserve part, the reserve object code of that fund.
Rachel,
So we're,
Bob?
so how does the contingency get developed? Where does that money come from for the contingency?
So the pension fund, that one specifically is through payroll cost. So we have to apply a payroll charge
So then you take some off the top or whatever. And make
and
the
it
contingency.
automatically goes into that pension bond fund. It just depends on the fund. So for instance, like our general obligation bond, that debt service fund is through property tax levy. There's a separate levy for the general obligation bond and that builds up our reserves for that bond itself.
Thank you.
so you're saying that the funding for the 300,000 in previous years, it hasn't been that high, except for the first 2020, 21, 22 year. So you're saying that it's deducted from your payroll liabilities? How is that? Explain that to me again.
It's a payroll cost that is charged. We calculate a percentage for that bond when we enter into that debt service arrangement. We calculate a percentage of what the payroll is when we run payroll. Take that percentage, or the system takes that percentage and moves it over to the debt service fund to meet the amortization schedule requirements of that debt.
Okay, and your amortization schedule will say 300,000.
No, that's why it's been corrected for the interest amount.
So this money was taken throughout the year, correct?
It's been taken out through many years since the bond was started in 2008.
But it looks like the proposed amount almost tripled for this coming year. Correct?
No, it has been corrected. So what page is that?
What I'm saying is that it was taken out of, you're saying that it was taken out, put into the account for what it intended.
For debt service, yes.
So you're saying that it was over a matter of several years?
Yes. We built up the reserve in that fund over several years to meet the balloon payment requirement for the end of life of that debt.
Thank you. So the balloon payment, that's what I'm getting at, why it was so much higher, why it was calculated at such a higher rate.
And And that wasn't a calculation, that was a mistake in how it was put in there. That's why it's a correction.
Okay.
So now instead of the interest being 300,000 and the next page having the reserve for next year of 272, 296. It is now $67,710 for interest and $504,586 for the reserve for next year. So it did not change the amount of money that was in the fund. It just changed the object code
Got it.
through that correction.
Okay. Do we have any other questions or?
I have a question, I'm just not sure it's a legal one.
Okay.
In the primary instruction, you increased your full-time employees. Primary instruction. Increase full-time employees,
Can you tell me what page number you're referring to?
page 17.
Which page?
Page 17?
Increase it from 14.5 to 15.1.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you also increased the junior high.
Okay.
From, 2.2 to 3.8.
Yeah.
You decreased the senior high.
Mhm.
And I'm curious why, if I can ask.
I don't think there's any specific reason why. What I can tell you is that, most of the positions that were charged to grants and had to be moved to the general fund were at the 1111 and 1121 function levels.
Which means,
That's the elementary and the senior high. Junior high, not senior high. So 1111 is elementary school, 1121 is junior high. So the positions that we had in grant funds previously that were charged to those areas and had to be moved to the general fund because those grants were no longer available were in those two functions. So that FTE and the costs got moved to the general fund because those grants are no longer available.
maybe because you increased the full-time employees for both primary and junior, but you decreased full-time employees for senior.
Correct.
I'm just.
Like I said, I can't answer to specific reasons, but I can tell you about those levels and.
All right. Okay. How many kids do we have now? How many in the school system?
Estimates from 590. It fluctuates daily, literally.
Last few months, I think it's been between like 577 and 594, so.
So what does this all boil down to, the bottom line? What's available to us? What do we still have to make up?
I don't know that dollar amount that we have to make up still to make sure that, are you talking about like, if we were looking at where we were as of September 1st, what the dollar amount would be to have that?
No, from when we got the notification from the state in March. And we
To start
lost,
school in September, right?
right, to start school in September. Where are we at?
So
as far as-
those are two separate things. So
Okay.
when we're talking about the money of the negative adjustment, that's separate from what our estimate is to start this budget.
Okay,
So we are now at a beginning fund balance in the budget that put us $220,000. Or I'm sorry, we have revenue for next year that is putting us $220,000 higher in the general fund than we were before. But our estimate for next year is a completely different topic. Because the estimate for next year was already going to be a hit, and that has nothing to do with anything. It doesn't have anything to do with changes or the negative fund balance or anything like that. That is because of our student enrollment and our teacher experience ratio. So I guess I I would need to know more about what you're looking at. If you're talking about just the difference in what our adjustment was, our negative adjustment that we found out about at the end of March to right now and what our actuals ended up as, or next year's dollar amount.
Well, I guess altogether, actually, because we lost money
Yeah.
in March when the state said, give it back.
Right.
And now, so now we're looking at trying to make sure we have enough money to open school in September.
Right.
I guess that's why that middle round in there is what I'm trying to figure out where we are.
Well, we already knew we had enough school to open, or money to open school in September because we have our estimate for next year. What the
Okay.
concern was what happened between the end of March and May 8th meeting to be able to make payroll, pay our bills and everything in July 1st, right? And so we don't have the actuals yet for June because we have a lot of June payrolls, but we are on track based on what our estimates are and the adjustments we had to make to end the school year to meet that goal of where we need to be to make payroll and pay our bills July 1st.
So the 2 weeks of furlough or the 4 days and 4 days has accomplished that.
As far as what our trends are showing, yes.
So when all this is said and done, you know, I know there's some questions probably you won't be able to answer, but we, as a school board, work all summer to figure out ways to streamline money so that we can make sure that, you know, we have enough teachers and instructional aides in the classroom to make sure that our kids are going to be successful. Are we going to have to do another addition to the budget to do this? I mean, you know, I'm going to be the driving force at trying to figure out, you know, what positions we can cut to make more money so that we can get teachers back and stuff. And we're gonna have to do a change to the supplement, to do like a supplemental budget to make that happen.
No, so I think the thing that's really important to remember is our budget is, our budget is at a very high level. We appropriate at the function. So when I'm referring to those changes being at 1,000 function, 1 XXX, 2 XXX, what I'm talking about is that we are allocating that dollar amount to that function, but it doesn't mean that we have to stay within exactly where it is for 1111 or exactly where it is for function 2540, because all of those roll up to one level according to the state. And even if we decide that we want more money, if we do the work and we want more money in the 1,000 function instead of the 2,000 function as the year progresses, we make those shifts. And then as we get towards this time of year, then we look and see if we're still within those legal appropriations to end the year. And if not, then we do what's called an appropriation resolution. And then it's just a board action that the board has to take. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, we said we were gonna do it at 2,000 and 1,000, you know, 100,000 here and 100,000 here. And now we want to move it all to here, then you guys are able to do that just through a resolution to keep us legal.
Would that include the vehicle replacement fund?
Those are all 200 funds. So as long as it's in appropriations within the 200 funds at the function levels, then yes.
So that whole amount of the 130,000 could be moved.
No, you can't move from the special reserve fund back over to the general fund.
Okay, I thought you just said yes.
No, I said within the functions
Okay.
within that fund. So the general fund has functions 1,000, 2,000, 5,000.
1,000, 2,000, 5,000.
Yeah. And then you have the 200 funds, and those all have the functions within them. Every fund has functions that we appropriate.
So this vehicle replacement fund then is kind of just stuck there in the replacement funds,
It's a reserve fund.
and it can't be reallocated or moved from that.
It is for a specific purpose. It was put in by board action, a budget committee action, if you will, in prior years for specific purposes, and that money stays in that reserve.
So even if the board took action to move it, they would be able to?
There are specific instances where that is possible, and yes, that would be a board level decision. That would require a supplemental budget.
So then I guess it's important that $10,000, then doesn't go. Move it around later. Right. So on Fund 410 update, increased revenue by 50,000 to. So that 50,000 is being moved, but that's a 400 account. That's not one of the 1,000. Correct.
That's a fund. 410 is a fund. Functions are in each fund. Again, if I had a whiteboard, it would help, but I don't, so. So we have Fund 100. Let's see if I can find a budget resolution so I can explain a little bit better. Maybe we can present that.
I think it's part of that too. If these funds aren't easily moved as the year progresses, then we need to be clear as to where these funds are getting allocated.
I'm not sure you said 410 is about $8. So that bumps that from $50,000 to $100,000. We know that their handler can cost about $75,000 in a gymnasium. That would be a capital project. That has to get fixed for heating and cooling. So capital projects, they'll put money in there, especially for rate of contractors and for those expenses. So that is reserve account. Spend pretty frequently because of the size of repairs we have to do in the business. And if we don't have money in there for that kind of thing, then it goes against the general fund where we are trying to put staffing.
And is that the situation that we're in now? Here, that some of those funds were moved from the general fund to cover some of those expenditures? The capital?
That in my general fund, that was part of the presentation at the May 8th meeting.
I don't know if I need to.
So, by the 410 account against, like, increasing at another 50,000. It would actually be proposed $150,000 to be put in there instead of 100,000. Is that correct? There's 100 now proposed. Right. So,
There's the money in there.
Yeah.
I apologize. Yes. Putting 100 in this year.
so there's 100,000 going into it this year in addition to the 50,000.
We had already in the original proposed budget had $100,000 transfer into. The proposal has an additional 50,000, yes.
That's what I'm asking.
So this is our resolution for our budget for this year, and this is how we make appropriations at the board level. So the general fund is Fund 100, and it has these different functions in it. Instruction is function 1,000, support services is function 2,000, transfers is function 5,000, and contingency is function 6,000. Special revenue funds, that's 200 funds, same thing, 1,000 function, 2,000 function, 3,000 function, 5,000 function. Fiduciary funds, this is our scholarship funds in Fund 700. So we have Fund 1,000 or Function 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 6,000. Debt service funds, this is our 300 funds. Debt service function is Function 5110. Capital project funds, that's Fund 400. Support services is 2,000 function. Facilities acquisition and construction is Function 4,000. So we appropriate the dollar amounts of this level. That means that we've given ourselves the legal power to spend the money at those levels, not specific to the individual functions of 1111, 1121, 1131. It means that we can do instruction. Anything that starts with a 1, we can spend up to this dollar amount. If we go over, if we decide we don't need as much in support services, we need more in instruction, then we can do an appropriations transfer at any time at the board level and move money from support services to instruction or vice versa. We can make any of those changes. The same thing with transfers. We can make those changes throughout the year before the budgeted transfers are completed at the end of the year.
Within that fund.
Yes, within that
Right,
range.
so you can't take special reserve fund money and put it in a general.
Correct. That is correct. So we appropriate at the function level within each fund. And that's why they're separated out by that resolution, and it has to be adopted by the board in June and signed by the board chair. So I guess the reason why it's important to share this is I know there's a lot of unknowns still, but we have a finite dollar amount that we know of at this moment in time. So that finite dollar amount has to be approved and deferred to the board. And then the board has to act on it and adopt the budget so that we can open the doors on July 1st. The work doesn't stop just because we have an adopted budget. The priorities are reviewed. When students come in during the school year, the priorities are reviewed and changes are made all of the time. This is a living document. That's why when I print out the budget, I know it's really important for our budget committee and our board to see that document. Once I get that printed out and given to you guys, I never look at it again. Never, because it's not accurate the minute you start school, the minute you open the doors on July 1st. It means nothing. It just means that this is the only thing I need to look at is my appropriations.
No, we see that when this is all
Yes,
pressed
it's
out.
always in your printed in your adopted budget document. And so you can refer back to that at any time.
It sounds like the most important part then would be where the monies are allocated, whether it be to the capital projects or the general funds, which is where your instruction takes place in the classroom, correct? The general fund, that's all your.
It's not just in the general fund, but instruction is the classroom, yes.
Is the classroom.
Uh-huh.
So that's where it's important for us to understand that by putting money then into the capital fund, where it could be probably better served in the general fund, might be important.
Whatever the committee decides is the most important use of the money, then that is a determination that can be made. So the caution that I like to make about reserve funds is the costs are not going to go down. These are one-time transfers, one-time monies. They're not going to continue to be maintained. And if you don't keep your reserves filled, then you don't have anything to protect you from an emergency. So if we didn't have anything in capital projects to start this year, we would have been in serious trouble.
We can't use capital project money to pay for teacher salaries.
No, we can't, but we can offset capital projects money to pay for stuff out of support services, which is in the maintenance and custodial, which would free up money that you can use for instructional services.
Because the functions are the same, even though the funds are different.
The work is the same, yes.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
So when I heard John say in the last meeting that our, for instance, the floor then went over by 90,000 approximately, and that had to come out of the general fund. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, that was one of the things that came out of the general fund, yes.
So how is that functioning? How did that happen? If we can't cross, how did it come out of the general fund?
Because your general fund is the only fund that you have the most flexibility in. So if we have, let's say, for instance, our Title I grant is in special revenue funds. So if we have staff that are charged to Title I and our Title I dollar amount changes or something occurs where we go over, if we have a training that we had planned for and the cost of it came in higher. When we get to the end of the year and we've overspent what are Title I dollars, anything that is overspent has to be moved to the general fund. So we take those expenditures and we recode them to general fund expenditures and it gets charged there. So anytime you overspend in any of the other funds, the general fund has to make up for it because your funds can't end up at a negative.
That's why there's a.
Yes.
Like, the increase to the general fund from last meeting is $200.
Correct.
And that goes towards anything in the general fund, or something to allocate to just instructions.
The budget committee can decide if they want to do something different with that $220,000 than what was proposed. Absolutely. What we heard during discussions at the last meeting was that it was important to preserve staffing. We looked at all kinds of services. We actually changed some service amounts and decreased them quite significantly. And then we were able to preserve some instructional services because of that, and well, support services too. We know that in just the classroom is not the only place that our students are supported, right? It's not just instructional services.
So my question is, the 4.91, is that what the number was increased from? I mean, not around, but like, that's how much you guys added to FTE?
Yes, however, it depends on what that ends up with for staffing. So when we built the placeholders, based on the increase amount, when we spoke with John and made those changes, we put them in certain areas. But those areas are based on those specific costs for that type of employee. So if, as the administration does the work and they decide that another type of employee in instructional services is more important than the type of employee that we put in there, then that will fluctuate with the FTE amounts also. So it's the dollar amount that we have the power to spend. FTE can fluctuate based on what kind of position it is.
Whether or not it's classified or.
Correct. Is this helpful?
It is.
Okay.
It is very helpful.
There's mud.
Yeah, so you have something like that ready for 2024 year, July 1, 2024, not yet, not until all of this is, okay.
Not until we have an approved budget. Harry, you're pretty quiet. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I'm good. I'm in about three different places right now, so. I'm paying attention though.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss you.
Thank you.
So is it possible then to, again, the 410 fund, the 50,000?
Anybody on the budget committee is welcome to make a motion to propose a change and have the budget committee act on it.
Can I get a motion from anyone or not?
Rachel, what have been optional typical capital project amounts? Because that might help folks understand why the reserve in the fund has to be higher than others.
I don't know, there's quite a range. I mean, it's pretty, it's 75,000 to 425,000 is the range of capital projects that we've seen in the last 2 years that were not grant related.
And we know we're starting off with an air handler right off the bat.
With the what?
Air handler in the gym, heating and cooling. One of the big ones in the high school gymnasium.
And what's the
So-
estimate on?
So I will, can you guys hear me?
Hi, Josh.
Hi, everyone. So I will say, that we up those transfers because partly like the capital project, we knew there was a $75,000 expenditure. Construction gets expensive quick. And while it looks tough to add more to funds like that, take, for example, our technology fund, we up that because we have to replace about 200 laptops a year at this year, 250 a unit. 50,000 still is kind of close to cutting that. So if you start look at holding back those payments and not putting in those amounts, it might save you a position this year, but the year after it might cost you two because you can only hold those back for so long until instead of having a steady, more consistent budget, you're having to make a big transfer because things happened. So that's kind of my only thing about transfers is those monies really do provide a consistent budget.
Thank you, Josh.
Why,
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Bob.
Josh, why do we have to replace 200 laptops? Or is it obsolescence or is it just a routine every 5 years we do it?
That's a third of them and the replacement cycle. So we do some every year so that we're not doing all of them every 3 or 4 years. We just always keep a few in rotation so that we don't we don't have to have a
But
big
couldn't
expense.
we push that out a little? I mean, is there something wrong with the laptops?
They just, yeah, they just do deterioration in efficiency or speed or whatever the processing is, they just sort of become obsolete. They become more work to manage and then they are providing productivity.
Okay.
An average Chromebook, I think, is estimated about three to 4 years. And then after that, it's not really good.
And I think we touched on this last time, at the May 8th meeting too. The great thing about the grant funds that we had received, from the pandemic was that we were able to make a lot of purchases of technology that were needed because we were so far behind in that cycle. But the bad thing about it is we purchased all of that technology with those funds all at the same time. So if you don't start your replacement cycle and get it into place, then we're looking at replacing everything at once, which is several $100,000. And that's kind of what Josh was referring to also.
So I understand what Josh is saying as far as, trying to set money aside for future or unforeseen expenditures. However, what I also keep hearing about, the formula is based on not only enrollment, but also on teacher experience. So what percentage does that go up? Is it by year of experience? Is it?
But the
2%?
formula,
Right.
it doesn't go up by any of that information. The formula goes up. The formula is based on, all of the factors that are applied to our district, but within the limits of what the state allocates as the state school fund amount, every biennium.
Okay, so then, because my understanding was that it was due to our teacher experience
And our
and enrollment.
yes, so our cut of the amount for the biennium went down drastically because our enrollment amount during COVID was held harmless at a much higher amount than what our true enrollment ended up being. Because we didn't get those students back in our doors.
So again, what's the percentage of teacher experience? What's allotted to that?
I don't know. There's not a portion that is allotted to the state school fund. So it's based on a ratio. So the state has, an average teacher experience amount. And so then they take your district's average teacher experience amount. And if you fall below that, then you're a negative amount to your state school fund. If you're above that, then you get a positive amount to your state school fund.
Okay, so they're just the state average that they.
Yes, and the formula based on that ratio is like 25 times your negative, or your ratio amount times 4,500 times this really like 45 digit long, like account code or something. I don't know what it is, but I think it's just that somebody went like this on their 10 key, and then that's the dollar amount that they put to the state school fund. So but it's based on that average, which is ridiculous because yes, your salary costs for an experienced teacher are higher, but your supports for a new teacher, I think, are equally as expensive. So they're looking at reviewing how the state school fund is put together. That's the big initiative before the next long session in 2025.
I started with the motion and request on 50,000 to be moved to the general fund.
Can you say that a little louder?
I said, I think that we should still entertain a motion for Fund 410, the 50,000 to be moved to the general fund. My thinking is that, as they've stated, you can move from general fund to other areas as needed, even if expenditures did come up later. You have the contingency fund where the 50,000 can come out of, rather than putting in another 50,000 into the fund that can only be used for capital expenditures.
Understood.
Have you already used you wanted to drink fund? One.
So,
Anymore.
anyone? Now, Rachel, would it be helpful to put that up again, what you had, the form that you had up there before?
Would it be helpful to you? Is that what you said?
Yes, to us. Thank you.
So this is. Move down into the general fund. Right now, it's in on to the technical project funds. Well, that was for last year. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
This is last.
Yes, that's correct, but she has it up there just to get an idea of how the funds are allocated.
Right.
They would, it's that same format for.
Don't you say 75,000 was already earmarked for something from that 100%?
We're asking.
Yes, and then Chromebook.
Yes,
Technology.
Yeah.
they're in a different fund. They're in
Oh.
Fund 289.
Oh, okay, okay.
John, is the HVAC the only major capital expenditure?
That's unknown. If I'm gonna be blunt, I'd like to see about $500,000 in that reserve, because the first time the boiler is kaput, we're gonna need $1 million. And we'll be borrowing against what we have in any kind of reserve and into the general fund. If we're not diligent about putting money into capital projects, 75-year-old buildings, and when things go south, they go south very quickly on us, and needing to keep some money in a safe spot that can only be used for that type of work is highly advisable, but it is a budget committee decision if they don't want to put the money in there and take that gamble.
For the 2023-2024 school year, there was a budget of 425. 100,000, yeah, 425,000.
Right.
So this year, the only starting would be with that additional 50 is 150,000.
Yeah.
Right.
What was your biggest expense last year? That made it go down from? Because you guys had a contingency already in there. What used most of that?
The Highland office.
Office renovation and subsequent, addition of the swimming pool in the Highland Elementary office foundation area.
Do you have any plans of, do you have any future plans to remodel this year?
Not that type of project right now. Any things in capital projects right now, at that small amount of money is gonna be more on the emergency side.
Yeah.
Until there's money put in there that can be put into proactive project, we're gonna be in reaction mode only.
And you guys have been fixing the boiler for a while.
Constantly, yeah. And there's been so much turnover in staffing since the boiler system's had repair, and then the vendors come in, their staffing changes. To say that it is cobbled together and turned around and twisted 3 times is probably an understatement. I have a fear about our heating cooling systems and our roofs, so probably my two biggest capital fears.
Do you know how many days that people in junior high school, their students there and teachers went out?
Without heat, 0 days that it didn't get turned on
Yeah.
or started slow or didn't heat up enough. There's several, and depending on if you're warm-blooded or not, some kids will fine, some kids will freezing. But there's always been something going on every year that I've been here. It gets sluggish. It doesn't fire up on schedule, so we come in Monday morning, we have to get it fired up, which takes hours to cycle through the building to get warm. So you waste all morning trying to warm up the building. Feel like it wasn't on at all. It's on, but.
I didn't have to go home. Right?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Carrie, do you have any questions? All right. Let's quickly hear from community again. Does anybody in the community have comments or questions? Anybody?
I only see one community member.
We have no more comments, so, if there is no further discussion, then we're moving on to action to approve the budget as presented.
There is a typed out statement that will include. We have both be read, so if we make the motion. This proposed budget, this is the document you'll need to refer to, which you stated correct. It said the proposed budget committee motions.
Can we ask questions about this, John?
Yeah.
The permanent tax rate, 4.3 what is it now? Is that what it is now currently? That's what it is. You're just restating what it is.
Yes, we have to levy it every single year.
That's the same thing with the bond.
No, the bond is based on what the payment amount is every year, so that dollar amount changes annually.
Okay,
It's
but
not
it's-
payment.
That's a balloon thing.
It's a housekeeping more thing than,
Yes.
Yeah.
We have to have action on it for us to send it to the assessor's office for the assessor's office to assess that levy on the property taxes.
If you've done the questions.
Pardon? No. I mean, I'll make a comment. The board realizes, each and every one of us, that we have a lot of work to do with the superintendent to make the next year's school year a positive one for our kids. So even though we're gonna take a vote tonight, our work's not done. I mean, it's gonna get hairier and nastier and more complex as we go get ready for the school year. So this board is, hasn't taken a vote, but talking amongst ourselves, we know that we've got a lot of work to do, and we're still gonna see, with Rachel's help, money found, money moved, whatever it's gonna take, so that our kids get the best education they can get, and we can keep teachers in our buildings. So I just wanted to put that out there.
There are grants available too. We have a grant writer or somebody grants for us?
We don't have a grant writer per se, but we have had staff apply for and receive grants throughout the year and throughout several years. And that's not talking about they call them grants from ODE, which are state school monies, given a title and rules. So we've got both types of grants already coming in and continuing.
And we can, we've got those grants coming in, so maybe the next board meeting we can find out what those grants are.
And counting of which ones we've received this year,
Yeah,
the other list.
Hey, Rachel,
Yes, sir.
so the budget for 24-25 appropriation 14 million. And with a leftover of 1.1, meaning 15.6. Was that based on how many kids a year? Because we're getting funds from the state, right? So you gotta assume a certain level of attendance. So what was that? What is that assumption?
What did we base our state school fund off of? We based it off of 590.
5 million.
Yeah.
Is that what we did last year?
We were at 600 last year, I believe,
Okay.
or for the current year, was what our estimate was originally. Hoping our students would return. I think to piggyback on your comment, Bonnie, grants, I think, yes, are important, but I think the bigger advocacy need is to have people raise their voices to the state before the long session in 25 about, the economic forecast, John has it in front of him, came out today. We really need to do work to make sure that our elected officials know how desperately they need to come in with higher numbers in the state school fund than what they're allocating.
Let me read you part of this from our post advocacy. At the midpoint of the 23-25 biennium, release of the forecast today, positive financial news showing another surge that is projected to generate an additional 532 million in net general fund and lottery resources for the biennium compared to the March forecast. At the halfway mark through the biennium, we're seeing the first projected personal kicker, 582.2 million. Projected corporate kicker grew by 5 million to 558.1 million. Corporate kicker funds will be required to be spent on K-12 education during the next budget cycle. Here's a personal comment. They like to give us those corporate kickers and then subtract some of the state money that they would otherwise give us. So we don't see an increase because of those corporate kickers. We get what we're going to be given by them anyway. So they don't have to spend their money because they have to spend kicker money. That's how they do that. So advocacy about give us what you're going to give us and give us our kickers if that's what's triggered. That would be one piece. So as we reflect on today's positive forecast and stable budget numbers, we want to remind leaders of the need to make a clear, convincing case to increase state funding in public schools to meet the increasingly complex needs of our students as we look toward the 25 session. everything in this forecast talking about growth, stability. We have reserve funds at almost 20%. And why the state is hanging on at 20% for rainy days, I feel like we've got a pond turning into a lake. There's plenty of rain going on. There's a need for just our slice of the pie to be what it was 20 years ago. It's decreased 9% from what it was 9 years ago of the state's allotment of dollars. You just keep shrinking education overall. They accept 2.4% roll-up costs, and they're sitting 2.1% roll-up, sort of what they like to give, and we're dealing with 4 to 6% depending what district we're in. They just are not keeping up, and they're trimming us back and tightening us up because they want to spend money in other places. If education is not the priority, taking care of our state, building our children into the leaders we need them to be to take care of us. If there's not the investment there, that question where it's going. So advocacy at the highest level is what we need out of this.
David Kaiser had that petition, that letter. I hope a lot of people sign that and send it forward to the legislatures, at least something.
Can board members make the motion to?
These totals on the motion, are they the budget that was reviewed 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
With the updates that I presented tonight.
What's the difference? What's the difference between them?
Between the numbers, the unappropriated and the regular one, or the,
In the appropriations and the unappropriated, those numbers changed, but it was very slightly.
so that's the $810,000 in the budget that I presented at the end of that change paper.
810,000.
At the very first slide, she was in. Part one of the slide, part 2 slide, it's on the changes to proposed budget.
I was doing something else.
If there isn't any more comments or questions, I'll include the motion to pass the budget for 2024-25 this year. Can't read the. That what you mean, everyone, what I was, yeah, somebody. Motion and. Is there any more discussion? No? No, is everybody good to vote? Is it? Okay. I'll do it then. Proposed motion, part 1. I move to approve the Douglas County School District number 105 Reedsport School District budget for the 2024-2025 fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025, in the appropriations amount of $14,530,681 and unappropriated ending fund balance amount of $1,131,586 for a total budget of $15,662,267. And do we read those both at the same time? No, we, well, okay. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Yep. Okay. Unanimous. It's been approved, budget for 2024-2025 fiscal year. So we also have another proposed motion, part 2. anybody want to make a motion on that one?
Madam Chairwoman, I move to approve the taxes provided for in the proposed budget of a permanent tax rate of 4,307,000. Sorry, I was getting all excited there for a second. $4.3788 per 1,000 assessed value for the general fund operations and a tax for bonded indebtedness in the amount of $702,909 for the general obligation bond series 2019 in the debt service fund.
Second.
Who have the second?
Fun.
Bonnie, thank you.
You vote? Unanimous?
So Carrie O, effective your abstaining is up on the first vote.
Yes.
So it's a 9-0 with 1 abstention.
Oh, I didn't know. Sorry about that. Carrie.
Steve.
So we'll conclude our budget meeting. And turn it over to Mr. Jones.
I myself and the rest of the board would like to thank you ladies for stepping up and helping with us. It's been very, very successful, I think. I appreciate it. And members of the audience, I'd like to thank you for coming and showing your support. And administrators, thank you very much for everything you do. And with that, we're adjourned.